Sarah Wolfer, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have the chance to chat and really explore your unique background. A little bit different than the typical type of background that I have on the podcast, but I think you'll bring a lot of really great insights to our discussion about leadership and self-care and mental health from the professional athlete perspective. As we get started today, I want to briefly share Sarah's bio with the listeners. Sarah Wolfer is CEO and founder of Girl Boss Sports, where they have two goals: to increase the number of women's sports coaches and keep girls in sports. She is also a professional tackle football player with the Phoenix Red Tails, which is part of the WFLA. She is also a mental health therapist and in the middle of opening up a private practice. She loves to talk about all things leadership, productivity, being a womanpreneur, the connection between sports and leadership, being a pro athlete, self-care, mental health, and other related topics. So again, what a really interesting and unique background and set of experiences that you bring to the table to talk about leadership topics and well-being. And I find the term womanpreneur to be fun to say, and it's definitely something we need more of. We need more empowered women to take on leadership roles and to start and run businesses. So I love all of that, and I look forward to having our discussion.
Yeah, me too. I love talking about all of those topics. So
yeah, as we get started, is there anything else just about your own background that you'd like to share with people by way of introduction?
I think you covered pretty much everything. Other things that, of note, I'm vegan recently. Been vegetarian for about a year now vegan. So that's something that's important to me. I love talking about leadership. I've definitely called myself a leadership nerd several times, so I'm happy to be here and talk about that. Yeah, I've been playing football just a couple of years actually, and before that I was a soccer player most of my life. So yeah, we can kind of talk about any of those things.
Excellent. And I've always admired vegetarians and vegans. I'm not sure I have the wherewithal and the commitment to make that happen in my life. But I have a 10-year-old daughter who, since she was 8, she just made on her own. She had they talked about it at school, and she was really concerned about the treatment of animals. And she just came home and she just said, I'm not going to eat meat anymore. And I'm like, really? Good for you. So since she's 10 now, and for 2 years she's been vegetarian, and I'm just so impressed by that. It's quite the commitment, and there's a lot of really good reasons to do it. And I wish I had more like drive to do it myself, but I admire you for that effort, because I think it's important.
Yeah, I mean, and kids are incredible, so it's great that your daughter's already doing that and standing up for what she believes in, which is great at 10 years old and 8 years old. And there's like you said, there's so many reasons you can do it. I actually had different reasons to start. It was when I saw, have you heard of Game Changers?
Yeah,
that movie, and the connection between being the best athlete I could be and that's how it started. And then it was more diving into the impact on the environment and animals and all the other things too. But so many good reasons to switch.
Yeah, great. Well, so can you tell us a little bit more about, you talked about playing soccer, and now you do football, and you started your own business. So maybe frame that up for us, how you got into these different areas and what you're doing with your business now to help support women in sports and women in leadership.
Yeah, so my journey as an athlete started when I was 4 years old. My first team was the Lion Queens, and my dad was the coach. And I fell in love with the game and became obsessed. Actually, I was the one that was, dribbling the soccer ball through my high school campus, always like wearing my Letterman's jacket. There's still a picture I look at in my old high school yearbook of me with my Letterman's jacket on and my soccer ball. And I even had heard at one point, one of my coaches told me, you need to be so familiar with your soccer ball, you should basically just sleep with it. And so I actually slept with my soccer ball for a while. Like, that's how obsessed I was. And I ended up going and playing collegiately and then semi-professionally several years ago. And again, love the sport. And I just saw over the years the connection between all of the things I learned, and so I'm 30 now, so I've been playing sports for 26 years, and all of the lessons I've learned along the way and how they've impacted me even before I started my company, but just taking on leadership roles in other people's organizations. And so much of that related to my experience as an athlete. And then I've also been a soccer coach since I was 14. Those were my first jobs. I was coaching 2-year-olds, which is a whole other experience. But so I started when I was 14, been doing that the entire time since then, usually as a side hustle until a couple of years ago when I started my company. And basically the reason I started it is that, number one, like we said, that there's girls that are dropping out of sports way quicker than boys. And so I'd seen that with, growing up, seeing some of my friends drop out who were really talented, but for lots of different reasons were dropping out of sports. And then I pulled statistics and found that girls are dropping out of sports at twice the rate of boys by the age of 14. And by the age of 17, half of all girls who were playing sports have now dropped out. And actually, like, seeing that written on paper was really painful to see that's like not just my experience, but so many others, even currently. And so the real reason that one bothers me the most, though, is that I saw a study by Ernst & Young, and they said that I can't remember how many women they interviewed, but all, female C-suite executives, and 96% of them reported that they played sports as teenagers, and 52% played at the university level. So it's like we see these clear connections between playing sports, especially as teenagers and young adults, and later finding leadership positions. And so when I realized if girls are dropping out at twice the rate of boys, how are we ever going to lessen that leadership gap across all industries? So that's the first goal. And then the second one is that as a coach, and I've coached in Miami and Oregon and Washington and all different types of settings, from, again, like 2-year-olds up to, coaching collegiately. And everywhere I've coached, there's such a shortage of women coaches, even in a sport like soccer, where a lot of people I've talked to think that it's because there's the U.S. women's national team, and, women in soccer are, really stepping up, and everyone knows how good. Like, it feels like people think it's more equal. But then when we actually pull statistics for coaches, only 21% of soccer coaches in the U.S. are women. And my experience has actually been way less than that. I remember I was a couple of years ago, I was sitting in a room at one of the places before I started my company, I was coaching. And we had an all-staff meeting, and there was probably 110 coaches in the room. And I looked around and counted 4 women. And that was a big moment where I was just, no, this can't continue to happen. We need more women in these coaching roles for lots of reasons, but some of them specifically, they all kind of go together. By having women role models, the athletes are more likely to stay too. And then also you can be what you can see. And so you can actually see that you can become a soccer coach, for example, or any other sports coach. And for both girls and boys, they get the opportunity to see a woman in a position of power, which will help them later on in life too. So that's kind of how Girl Boss Sports got started.
Well, that's excellent, and everything you said is absolutely true. And it's startling. It's sad to see. And there's so many reasons why it's happening. But the bottom line is we need to disrupt that. We need to disrupt women dropping out of sports. We need to encourage more women to get back in it, to, if not sports, into leadership roles. And I remember seeing that same study that you just cited about all of the women CEOs, and it was shocking to me, frankly. I was so surprised by that, and then it was so startling to see the accompanying data about women in sports. I'm like, if we're trying to get more women into leadership roles and leadership positions, and they're already disadvantaged in so many ways, and it's so difficult for many women to rise into those levels of prominence of leadership in organizations, then we're just even doing more of a disservice to them, when we're not supporting women and girls to be involved in sports. And not that that's the only path, obviously, but it's a dominant path for many women to find that level of success. So I love what you're doing with your business. It's awesome that you're pushing that forward. And the idea of having more women coaches as well. I was just thinking, so I'm a professor full-time. I do the podcast and I do consulting on the side. I'm thinking of my university and the women's sports. and I can go through and click through my head. Almost all of the coaches of the women's sports are all men. I'm trying to think of, we have 8 women's sports on my campus, and I'm not sure about a couple of them, but all the rest are all men.
Yeah, and you think about it, the other side too, do any of the men's teams have a woman coach?
No, yeah. So exactly. And I remember being so excited when I saw, the San Francisco Giants baseball team was the first to hire a female coach in the major leagues, and how cool that was. And I can't remember which team, someone in the NFL did a team in the NFL last year hired a female coach. It's so rare that it's such big news when it happens. It would be nice if it wasn't so rare.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we're entering this new phase where hopefully it's less rare. I think that women are crashing down barriers across all industries, and I'm seeing a lot of really powerful women, even in the football world, really stepping forward. So hopefully there's not as many of it's the first woman to do this thing. Like, it's more, the floodgates are open and there's lots and lots of women doing this thing. So that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, me too. And I want that for my daughters. I have 4 daughters. And I want them all to feel empowered, and I want them to all feel like they can do anything they want. I don't want them to feel restricted in any way, like perhaps women in previous generations have felt restricted.
It's interesting.
I hope we get there.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, because I was listening to a different podcast. Michelle Obama just released a podcast. I'm not sure if you saw that. Did you already listen to the episode?
Yeah.
And when they were talking about her and Barack, I know them, but they were talking about how, there's been this shift in families of really even fathers saying to their daughters that you can do anything, but then there's not the shift in all of these institutions and organizations. And I know, my dad always told me I could do anything I wanted to. But then I did enter these other organizations and spaces and found that it actually, in action, it wasn't true. What the Obama said is accurate. And I really just resonated with that there's so many instances when I've been in workplaces where I experienced inappropriate behaviors. If I just wrote down all of the things that have been said to me in the workplace, it would be shocking, I think, for a lot of people. And equal pay, had to fight for that at one point in my career. And it's just wow, no, I really like that our families have shifted in a lot of areas, but we still have so much work to do on systems level as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and yeah, we could talk about all sorts of systemic inequalities, in society, for women, based on race and LGBTQ plus issues and all sorts of things, and unfortunately, there's still a lot of barriers, and there's still a lot of work to do there. But I tried to remain encouraged that at least we are making some progress. And hopefully we will continue and maybe speed up the progress that's being made. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk more about well-being and mental health of women in sports, women in leadership. What are some of the challenges you've seen that, we've already talked about the systemic issues, the inequalities. You've referred to kind of what I'm assuming you weren't explicit, but I'm assuming you're talking about kind of harassment and some of those types of things you've experienced in the workplace. Unfortunately, that's the experience of far too many women. So I'm sure that contributes to some of the mental well-being and mental health types of challenges that women leaders might have. But what are some other things, that might contribute to that? And what can we do to have a more positive workplace that empowers women and provides a safer place and better supports them in terms of mental health issues?
Yeah, you hit it right there. There are all of those systemic issues that definitely impact mental health, especially for, I've seen it as a woman leader and across several industries, but it's also all of the subtle things that happen. There's the big moments like harassment, and, we don't have to go into all of that, and, but equal pay and all of those kind of issues, but then also the microaggressions that happen on a regular basis, the automatic assumption that whenever I enter any workplace, really, that I don't know what I'm doing when I do. Even as a soccer coach, for example, when I've been doing that for 16 years, and I'll still have, men come up to me and try to explain to me how to be a soccer coach, even when I'm the one providing a training on how to be a soccer coach. So it's just that all of those moments add up, and it really takes it takes a big toll on our mental health. And you also, like you said, there's women, and that's, one of the identities I hold, but then I'm also a member of the LGBT community. And then when you add any other marginalized identity on top of that, whether it's race, ethnicity, ability, it just makes it even more challenging. So I think on an individual level, it's really important. I have a whole self-care plan. That's something I talk about all of the time, and probably every single therapy session I'm doing currently, I talk about what's your self-care plan for this week. And it includes like a lot of preventative things, like ongoing stuff, like meeting our basic needs, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Making sure I'm sleeping enough. That's my number one. And actually I learned, women actually need more sleep than men. So that's something that I'm really actively trying to do. Making sure I'm eating well. It's part of also why I'm staying vegan, just because it really helps my own body. Making sure that I'm meeting, my needs for exercise, all of those things. I like to think of it more holistically and looking at the entire human being, not just like what's in front of me in the session. And so really focusing on all of those different areas, and then rising up through the different needs that we have. Then meeting our needs for social connection, the next biggest one I talk about, like who are your supports right now, actively working to improve those, which I will say is really hard right now because we're in the middle of a global pandemic. And so it's definitely more challenging to either make new connections or maintain old connections. But there are ways to do that. So whatever that is in your listeners' lives, that's something that's really important. But I guess the point of all of this is I've written it down before, where I just have what I need to do when I'm doing well as an ongoing basis, and then also some tools that I have for when I'm not doing as well. Things like when I'm really struggling, I know I need to do something physical. I need to go for a run, and so I'll just go run 3 miles real quick. Other things, like I have different, some of these are more silly than others, but I have a different playlist for different moods I'm in. So if I'm, I need to really pump myself up, I have a playlist for that. If I need to go work out, I have a playlist for that. I have, going back to the social supports, I have different friends for different reasons. So sometimes I just want to call someone and vent. I don't want solutions, and so I have someone on my phone for that. Other times I need someone who's going to challenge me, and so I have someone for that. So really just taking the time to think about what are the areas that I really need to do well at, and how can I best set myself up for success for those. So yeah, creating a self-care plan is definitely number one for me for addressing mental health.
Yeah, great advice. And I mean, really, we all need to do that.
Oh yes.
So obviously we're focusing primarily on women today in this episode. But everyone needs to pay attention to self-care and their mental health, and particularly in amidst this pandemic where there's a lot of social isolation and just all the stress and anxieties and people losing jobs and trying to figure out how are they going to pay their rent, and we have all the racial inequality turmoil that's happening, and the protests and Black Lives Matters. It's at the forefront of everyone's mind, and we're in an election year, and so the political tensions are high. And we just finished Pride Month in June, and so we have all those issues on our mind, and all of this, it does take a toll in terms of stress and anxiety, and you add on top of that the social isolation, like you've mentioned, and now it's a prime cocktail to produce mental health challenges. So everyone really needs to pay attention to this. Employers need to pay attention to this and look out for your employees. And like you mentioned, it's as hard as it might be for me as a cisgender white male middle class guy, it's way harder for marginalized groups. Yeah. The layers are added on, for anyone who doesn't have all the privilege that I have, and then they have to deal with everything else on top of it. So it's a hard time. So I hope all of our listeners will pay attention to that, and particularly for women who may be listening, or men who may be leading women. Like, what can you do to better support, provide more opportunities, break down the barriers, remove the systemic barriers that inhibit people participating in various roles and putting themselves forward. Another, I don't remember the specific statistic, but there's a lot of research about just women when they apply for jobs, like men basically are like, I only meet, maybe a third of the qualifications. I'm just going to apply anyways. For women, it's something like 95% of all of the requirements that they feel like they have to meet before they would even consider applying. And so that leads to more inequity. So we need more mentorship. We need more encouragement. Approach, if you're a man and you're in a position of leadership or power or influence, and there's a position open that one of your female coworkers would be awesome at, go approach them and encourage them to apply, because that might be the nudge they need to take that step. And they may very well be like the awesome fit for that position. And we won't know it if they don't ever apply. So we need to encourage all of that.
Yeah, definitely. I agree 1,000% to what you said. I think also, as you were talking, I was just thinking about the other really big thing that I think helps is basically it comes down to courage to have hard conversations. And I know they're hard, but I think that, I can't remember who said it, but we can do hard things is something I've really been thinking a lot about. So I just know when I've, like, going back to, I referenced the equal pay issue that I experienced, and that situation could have happened very differently if the response, because who I am as a human, I had all of my data. I had, a spreadsheet with 15 columns of the ways in which basically I was doing a lot more work, had more, brought more money in, had more contracts, more clients, more staff, in every area you can imagine. Had to have more educational requirements. So literally every area. And trying to have that conversation with men in positions of power went terrible. And the things that were said to me afterwards of, you're being perceived a certain way when you bring up issues like this. And if you change it for you, we're going to have to change it for everybody. And just all of these reactions were made what was already a really challenging situation even worse. And so if I had, just like an ally to say like, hey, it sounds like this is really challenging for you. Let's talk about it. Like, what can we do to make this better? Even just leaning into it and trying to understand, like, when you tell me I'm too assertive, how you wouldn't say that to a male leader. So like, if these men had been, and some were, but specifically what my situation was, there was a man that was just not willing to engage in these conversations, and it made it so much harder. So when people do bring up issues like that, I think it's really important, again, regardless of the marginalized identity they hold, being able to engage in those conversations and listen to their experience and believe them. So I think that's really important. I also think what you said about mentorship programs, going and talking to the women who are, really skilled in their positions and maybe need a little extra push to, advance to the next level. Because like you said, what you said is right. There's men who are able to just look at, like you said, three out of 10 things in a job description. I think I saw a meme about Kanye West being a good example of this. You can see it, and then he goes for this major position, but women, like you said, have to meet almost all of the criteria. And I've seen it from so many of my colleagues, and friends. Oh, there's this one thing that I haven't done before, so maybe I shouldn't go for it. My response is always go for it. At least you went for it and you're going to know. So those are my 2 cents.
Excellent. Well, it has really been a pleasure talking with you today. I really hope that listeners will take into account these issues and try to find ways to empower more women in their lives and give more women opportunities to find themselves into leadership roles. As we finish up today, I'd love to give you a chance to share with the listeners how they can get in contact with you, learn more about what you're doing, and perhaps reach out if they need help to do more of this in their own work.
Yeah, so if you want to just follow along my journey, I'm on Instagram as CEO_Sarah with an H, Wolfer, WOLFER. If you want to find out more about my companies, the first one's girlbosssports.com. That's the one for women and girls in sports. And then my private practice is courageousyou.us.
Awesome. Well, I really encourage my listeners to reach out. And it's been a pleasure talking, and I hope everyone stays healthy and safe. Have a wonderful week and find meaning and purpose at work. Thank you.